Fake it until you make it. It is an expression that amply describes what happened to Theranos. It also characterizes the actions of the company's founder and CEO, Elizabeth Holmes. It is the story of a fraudster who was once the darling of Silicon Valley and the world's youngest self-made female billionaire before the fairy tale unraveled, and she was found guilty of defrauding investors out of $945 million.
What do you dream for?
That less people have to say goodbye too soon to people they love.
Elizabeth Holmes promised the world a medical revolution.
Theranos means being able to see the onset of disease in time to be able to do something about it.
Holmes, 39, had dreamed of being a billionaire as a child, hoping to make her stamp on the world in some way. But as soon as she achieved her dreams, her fake it till you make it approach saw everything crumble away as quickly as it was built. The idea accomplished by imitating confidence, competence, and an optimistic mindset. Chapter No. 1. Elusive Billionaire turned fraudster. Former Theranos CEO Elizabeth Holmes was sentenced to more than 11 years in prison Friday for misleading investors regarding her blood testing startup. In 2015, Forbes named Holmes the youngest and wealthiest self-made female billionaire in the United States on the basis of a $9 billion valuation of her company. In the following year, as revelations of potential fraud about Theranos' claims began to surface, Forbes revised its estimate of Holmes' net worth to zero, and Fortune named her in its feature article on the world's 19 most disappointing leaders. She was convicted of 4 counts of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud after a 4-month-long trial that featured testimony and tales of billionaire investors, former US officials' endorsement, and patients who had used the company's technology. Holmes also took the stand over the course of 7 days in emotional testimony defending her actions as being in good faith and denying that she was aware of the fraud. "I am devastated by my failings," Holmes stated. "Looking back, there are so many things I'd do differently if I had the chance. I tried to realize my dream too quickly." But first, look at her early life to get better understanding, and then you'll how it's all began. Chapter 2. A college dropout became Theranos founder. Elizabeth Holmes was born on February 3, 1984 in Washington, D.C. Her father, Christian Rasmus Holmes IV, was a vice president at Enron, an energy company that later went bankrupt after an accounting fraud scandal. Her mother, Noelle Ann, worked as a congressional committee staffer. Christian later held executive positions in government agencies such as USAID, the EPA, and USTDA. Holmes graduated from high school at St. John's School in Houston. During high school, she was interested in computer programming and says she started her first business selling C++ compilers to Chinese universities. Her parents had arranged Mandarin Chinese home tutoring, and partway through high school, Holmes began attending Stanford University's summer Mandarin program. In 2002, Holmes attended Stanford, where she studied chemical engineering and worked as a student researcher and laboratory assistant in the School of Engineering. After the end of her freshman year, Holmes worked in a laboratory at the Genome Institute of Singapore and tested for severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus, SARS-CoV-1, through the collection of blood samples with syringes. She filed her first patent application on a wearable drug delivery patch in 2003. Holmes reported that she was raped at Stanford in 2003. Holmes described her fear of needles as motivation and sought to perform blood tests using only small amounts of blood. When Holmes pitched the idea to reap vast amounts of data from a few droplets of blood derived from the tip of a finger to her medicine professor Phyllis Gardner at Stanford, Gardner responded, "I don't think your idea is going to work," explaining it was impossible to do what Holmes was claiming could be done. Several other expert medical professors told Holmes the same thing. However, Holmes did not relent, and she succeeded in getting her advisor and dean at the School of Engineering, Channing Robertson, to back her idea. In 2003, when she was 19, founded the company with the name of Real Time Cures, then later changed into Theranos in Silicon Valley, California. It is also known as the Santa Clara Valley and was formed by generations of tech pioneers whose ideas were brought to life with the help of deep pockets. Robertson became the company's first board member and introduced Holmes to venture capitalists. Holmes was an admirer of Apple founder Steve Jobs and deliberately copied his style, frequently dressing in a black turtleneck sweater, as Jobs did. Holmes said her mother dressed her in black turtlenecks when she was young, It was a stunning fall from grace for Holmes, who had modelled herself as the next Bill Gates or Steve Jobs and won widespread acclaim, including from Harvard University and Time magazine, for a phony technology which she claimed would revolutionise blood testing methods by using miraculously tiny volumes of blood, such as from a finger prick. Chapter No. 3: Unravel the truth behind deceptive Edison machine. Holmes claimed that her company had remarkable technology capable of diagnosing a number of medical conditions from a mere drop of blood. The use of the blood analyzer, known as the Theranos Sample Processing Unit (TSPU), Edison or Minilab, worked at least for a time. All the way, Holmes was very consciously promoting herself in the mold of Steve Jobs, initially mocked only to become mighty. Investment flowed into the company coffers. By 2014, Theranos was valued at $10 billion. But how was this huge fraud exposed? Let's reveal how it all happened. Though her stardust began to settle, when the Wall Street Journal exposed frames of her story as technology overhyped, the reckoning fueled a barrage of scathing news reports, a New York Times bestseller, and a feature documentary leaving Holmes accused of fraud for peddling impossible science and portrayed as a vixen. It changed everything from fake success to defeat. Theranos stifled dissent when one of its employees, Erica Chung, told Sunny Balwani, the former president and chief operating officer, about the flawed quality controls at the company that had ignored problems with the process of analyzing blood. Balwani basically told Chung to mind her own business. Chung realized her concerns were falling on deaf ears. She told John Carey-Rue of the Wall Street Journal, "This was not an environment, that is not a culture where they really care about what consequences this might have on patients." And that proved the game changer for Holmes to destroy her foolish dreams. In October 2015, the Journal published Carey-Rue's bombshell article. He continued to report problems with the company and Holmes's conduct in a series of articles, and she appeared on CNBC's Mad Money the same evening the article was published in 2015. Jim Cramer said, "The article was pretty brutal," to which Holmes responded,
This is what happens when you work to change things, and first they think you're crazy, then they fight you, and then all of a sudden you change the world. I have to say I personally was shocked to see that the Journal would publish something like this.
He also said that Holmes created an intricate web of deception. Even as machines found their way into chemists and were being used by medical insurance companies, they never actually worked. Holmes put patients' lives at risk and cost investors millions of dollars.
Theranos investors did not do what you would consider sufficient due diligence.
Chapter No. 4: Steps: How Holmes Loses Everything. In January 2016, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS, sent a warning letter to Theranos after an inspection of its Newark, California laboratory uncovered irregularities with staff proficiency, procedures, and equipment. In July 2016, CMS banned Holmes from owning, operating, or directing a blood testing service for a period of 2 years. Theranos appealed that decision to a US Department of Health and Human Services appeals board. Shortly thereafter, Walgreens ended its relationship with Theranos and closed its in-store blood collection centers. In 2017, the state of Arizona filed suit against Theranos, alleging that the company had sold 1.5 million blood tests to Arizonans while concealing or misrepresenting important facts about those tests. On May 16, 2017, approximately 99% of Theranos shareholders reached an agreement with the company to dismiss all litigation and potential litigation in exchange for shares of preferred stock. Holmes released a portion of her equity to offset any dilution of stock value to non-participating shareholders. In 2018, published a book titled Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup, detailing his investigation of Theranos. At its height in 2015, Theranos had more than 800 employees. On September 5, 2018, the company announced that it had begun the process of formally dissolving, with its remaining cash and assets to be distributed to its creditors. For 12 years, she essentially ran a Ponzi scheme by attracting millions of dollars from primarily venture capitalists who saw it as a unique opportunity to cash in on the boom in Silicon Valley. She had scooped in nearly $1 billion in funding from some of the world's biggest pockets, venture capitalist titans, including Tim Draper, Donald Lucas, and Dixon Doll, wealthy heirs to the founders of Amway, Walmart, and Cox Communications, and heavyweights of tech and media, such as Larry Ellison and Rupert Murdoch. It's not a stretch to label Holmes as immoral. The deeper question is Chapter 5, Bright Minds Caught in Fraudster's Web. Is it easy to deceive the top millionaire investors with this fake Theranos machine? How she did fool so many bright people and one of the biggest drug chains in the US, Walgreens? The answer lies in her cult of personality. She controlled Theranos through the force of personality and control of the communication channels. It was a story that Holmes told with unwavering conviction. If you watched a movie and you took one frame out of that movie, you said, "Okay, Elizabeth, tell me the story." I would never be able to tell you that story. But if you gave me a series of frames, I could begin to piece together a story. The concept captivated investors and media and turned Holmes into a startup sensation. Her confident charm and even physical appearance were cited to explain why distinguished advisors and hopeful investors in a male-dominated field bought what she was selling yet. Not everyone is convinced that Holmes was just a persuasive pretty face, or that her methods to materialize her vision should be viewed in black and white. This is going to sound a little strong, but to a certainty she's a victim because she didn't know what she didn't know, and she relied on people who gave her bad advice or mismanaged it. We had that people said absolutely could not be done, especially when I tried to raise money for the first time to start the company. I wanted to change the way lab testing was done. If you're going to start a company, the first question is, why? Right, for me it was, this is a change in the world that I want to see. Holmes. The change was never realized, at least not by Theranos. Instead, the company imploded under a raft of lawsuits, regulatory actions, and SEC fines, all targeting Holmes for promising more than she could prove, yet holding Holmes to both criminal charges and such intense media scrutiny could ultimately be what makes her unique as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. This fake it till you make it ethos who deserves to shoulder the blame. Prosecutors say it's Holmes and her former boyfriend and Theranos Kusani Belwani for allegedly operating the once-hyped blood testing company as a criminal scheme that defrauded investors, doctors and patients others. Chapter 6, Lessons and Red Flags for Investors. When did the alleged charade begin? Why did financial backers keep her company afloat for more than a decade? And what lessons should future investors learn? The answers lie in a tangle of conflicting symptoms that can give investors reason for confidence as well as caution in the traditions of seed capital, rich Silicon Valley. Disruption often begins like this. An aspiring creator claims their vision for a new reality, then sets out to piece together the missing parts to their puzzle. What we want to change was the fact that when you find out you're sick, you're already too sick in many cases to be able to really change the course of the disease the way you change. That is, you have to reinvent every element of the system, which means you have to reinvent the test. You have to reinvent the devices, you have to reinvent the software, you have to reinvent the locations through which the testing is provided, the pricing. So this was not a short-term business plan. Holmes. And there's one place, perhaps more than anywhere else in the world, that fosters the rapid incarnation of these bold ideas. This is the Valley of Dreams, right? It's a unique situation. There's no other place in the world where somebody with a big idea can come and have access to capital, have access to all of the corporate services you need to get it off the ground. So people come here with big dreams. And I think Elizabeth had a great big dream region of resources in its early days. The case of Theranos, at one time a high flyer in Silicon Valley, portrays a company run by an ambitious person who thought she could get away with just about anything. Absent the checks and balances needed for strong operating controls, Holmes was able to do just that until Erica Chung came forward and John Carreyrou did his expose on the rise and fall of the company. In the end, Theranos is a story of a hard-charging CEO who was motivated by greed and hubris.